as Anthony mentioned, my name is Sean Boland. I am a VMware certified instructor as well as being a Microsoft certified instructor. I have been with New Horizons for about 7 years, and I am out of the New Horizons location in Omaha, Nebraska, out here in the middle of the country today. A little bit about myself and about New Horizons. I've been a technical trainer for about 15 years. Work with VMware technology, Microsoft technology, CompTIA technology, etc. Specific to the VMware ecosystem, hold certifications in all 3 of the major technology areas from VMware, that being the data center level, the cloud products, and the desktop/mobility products. We're going to be focusing primarily today on the data center products or the server virtualization products. As Anthony mentioned, you do have the opportunity to toss questions up. I'll try to answer as many of those as we can towards the end. If your questions bleed outside of what we're talking about, that's perfectly okay with me. For instance, maybe somebody is sitting out there thinking, well, can I virtualize my Microsoft Exchange server? Toss it out there. We will take a look at that. As far as Horizons goes, for those of you who are unfamiliar with New Horizons, we are a training provider, one of the largest training providers in the world. We have over 2,100 classrooms internationally, 2,400 instructors, 56 countries, 3 million student days of training per year. That's what we do, is we do training. In fact, I am teaching a VMware Horizon View class this week, catching me on lunch break right now, so this is what we do. I'm fortunate enough, was honored as one of the top 25 technical instructors globally out of those 24 instructors for New Horizons this past year. We are a VMware training partner. We have partnered with literally every major technology company out there. If you are running technology from a particular company, chances are we touch that technology, whether it's VMware, Microsoft, Cisco, IBM, Citrix, Red Hat, etc., you name it. Along with the technical training, which is where I live, server and virtualization space, lots of training spanning the non-technical areas, project management, ITIL, your Office suite of products, etc. It's technology. I pretty much guarantee we're going to talk about it in one way, shape, or form. So that's a little bit of a background. Our purpose in being here today, the title of the seminar, VMware Virtualization, Are You on Board? What we're really going to focus on here is just what the heck is virtualization? But when I say I'm virtualizing my servers, what does that mean? How can that benefit me? Should I be doing this? I'm a small business. We've got 2 servers sitting in the back office. Is this technology for me? Maybe you're a larger business. You've heard about virtualization. You haven't jumped in yet. What's it all cracked up to be? That's really what we're here for. And I'm going to try to boil this down into some easily digestible ways. If you're a non-technical person, you're not an IT person sitting out there, I want to make sure we can communicate these ideas to you. For those of you who are technical people, for my admins sitting out there in the audience, don't hesitate to fire away the technical questions. I'll handle whatever you got, and if you stump me, we'll follow up with an email and get the answer to you. So with that, VMware. Company's been around for a while. Founded in 1998. In some ways that doesn't seem that long ago, but think of where we've come technology-wise in that amount of time. VMware has positioned themselves and is quite literally the undisputed leader in virtualization products for servers, desktop, and cloud, and make sure you know what that means. VMware owns a huge majority of the server virtualization space out there. If you look at their competitors, the Microsoft, the Citrix, and things like that in the world, VMware is the 800-pound gorilla. They basically carved out this industry. Everyone else has been playing catch-up to them, and VMware continues to innovate in taking this virtualization technology in directions that it's never been before. We have the annual VMware conference next week in San Francisco, which I will be at. And we anxiously await that every year to find out, okay, what's next? What else are we going to do? when we ask the very basic question, what's server virtualization, or what is a virtualized server? I've heard my IT people talk about, okay, we're running VMs or a virtual server. What the heck does that mean? Well, when I teach my classes on this, which I do every week, we do a compare and contrast. Let's look at what we know. Let's look at what we understand. And that would be a traditional physical architecture. This is what we have known in an IT world forever. And that is, I need to run some type of an application, whether it's email or a website, a file server, whatever. So what do? We go out and buy a server. I go to my favorite server vendor, your IBMs, your HPs, your Dells of the world, and you pick your favorite vendor out there, and I say, okay, I need a server. It needs to be this big. It needs this much processor, this much RAM, this much disk space, etc. We bring that back, we install a single operating system on that. I load my applications on it. And when my needs change, and I need to run another application, I buy another server. I buy another server. I buy another server. I'm buying all of this hardware to run my operating systems, to run my applications. Of course, we're networking all that together, connecting up the internet, got my better storage out there, etc. This is the IT world that we've all known for a very long time, and it still exists. Virtualization's changing this formula. It's changing the way we look at things, but this is a traditional physical architecture. Now, when we talk about buying these physical servers, physical hosts, installing operating systems on there, notice I'm not being specific as to what operating system. You may be a Windows shop, you may be a Linux shop, you may be running Unix, etc. At this point in time, whatever, it's just a server. Whatever application you're running on there. New application, new server, new piece of hardware. When we say we're going to virtualize something, my virtualized architecture looks like this. Doesn't look very different, but there's some key fundamental differences with this. First of all, I'm still buying physical servers. I need the horsepower. I need the CPU. I need the memory. I need the disk. That's what executes my programs. I can't get rid of that. And we're never going to get rid of hardware. However, what's changing is the way we use the hardware. Notice on the physical architecture, the traditional way to do this, I had one physical host which ran one operating system which ran applications on top of that. In a virtualized architecture, I'm still buying a physical server. However, now the operating system that I am installing on that physical machine is going to be the VMware vSphere platform. That's VMware's platform. Call it vSphere. That's our virtualization platform. I'm going to install a product on there called ESXi. That's the operating system. Now, that's a very special operating system. It's not an operating system as you and I know it, like when you sit down at your Windows 7 machine. It's not that kind of an operating system. That VMware vSphere product, its sole purpose is to let me run multiple operating systems on that server simultaneously. Notice on each one of those physical servers, I'm showing multiple VMs or multiple virtual machines. Now the picture shows 6 VMs running on each physical server. That number is variable. I can run 2 VMs on a server. I can run 20 VMs on a server. It depends upon what the horsepower needs are of the VMs and what the horsepower is of my server. I just size things appropriately. When we take a look at a virtualized architecture, we'll get into pluses and minuses of all this in a few moments. The one thing that we can see most immediately is that if one of my users, one of my business managers comes along and says, hey, we need to implement a new product, we need to stand up a new web server, I'm not trapped into that same old way of thinking anymore. I'm not trapped by saying, oh, I've got to go out and buy another physical server and go through that whole process, because as long as I've got space, I'll just say horsepower available, on one of my existing VMware vSphere servers, I can just simply create or spin up, as we call it, another virtual machine. I've got space available on server 1. Let's go ahead and fire up another machine on server 1. Not a problem. Obviously, I have a finite amount of resources, a finite amount of horsepower there. I can't infinitely add virtual machines. I may, at some point in time, have to go and buy another physical server to handle my load. But I am no longer trapped in that every time I need to run something new, I have to buy a new physical server. Okay? Virtualization changes that basic equation. Now, you can get out there and start running through things in your head. If you're a business owner, the first thing that may be popping in your head is like, sounds like I might be able to save some money. Sure. Maybe I can get by with 4 physical servers in a virtualized infrastructure, where maybe if I did that with just a 1 by 1 by 1 physical infrastructure, I'm buying 20 servers or 30 servers. So I'm buying fewer servers. Fewer servers means they're consuming less energy. I'm becoming more green. That's saving me money. If I'm paying for space in a data center to rack all these servers, don't know if you guys have ever priced out data center space. You're paying by the square foot. Okay, I'm putting 4 servers in there versus 40 servers in there. I'm taking up less physical space. I'm paying my data center vendor less money. Now, there's all other kinds of cool things we're doing with sort of virtualization, okay? But we can start to see some immediate benefits from this, because that's the big question. As a business owner, you're sitting back there and you're saying, why? What's in it for me? Why should I write a check to VMware to purchase their product to do this? I've got to have some return on my investment. And there's lots of places we'll get the return on the investment. This one's the most immediate and the most obvious. I can do the same work or more with less hardware. Okay, I'll buy into that. Now, there's some pretty cool magic that's going on underneath the covers. And if you were to come and take one of my VMware vSphere classes, which of course I'd love you to do someday, in our first chapter I would ask you a question. And I'd say, okay, we're going to create a virtualized server infrastructure like this. Okay, here's what it's going to look like. And then I'd ask you, okay, what did we just virtualize? Did I virtualize those operating systems that are in the VMs? Did I virtualize the hardware that they're using? Or did I virtualize both? As a trainer, I throw that question out there, and I kind of wait until the students start to think about it and say, I don't know. What did we virtualize? Well, you virtualized hardware. This is just a little cross-section of one of those individual servers. So if I go back with the slide, okay, that server over on the left where it says VMware vSphere, okay, that's a physical server. It's got some virtual machines running on top of it. This is just a different look at it. So way down at the bottom, you see the little graphics. That's CPU, memory, network, and disk. Those are the physical components inside that server. Remember, that's my engine. That's what's running my operating systems. That's what's running my applications. I can't get rid of hardware altogether. I've got to have hardware somewhere. So that's the physical hardware I bought with that server. Now, up above, you see each little box where it says app and OS. That's each individual virtual machine. When we virtualize a server or create a virtual machine, however you want to word that, however you want to term it, what we're doing is we're installing an operating system. It's the same operating system we always run, Windows, Linux, Unix, take your pick. Each one of those separate VMs or separate operating systems gets its own individual hardware allocation. In other words, I'm telling that first virtual machine, the one on the left, I'm telling that virtual machine, okay, you can see 1 processor, you can see 2 gig of RAM, you can see 1 network card, and you can see 20 gig of disk space. I'm allocating or presenting that hardware to that virtual machine. I'm slicing up the pie and I'm serving it out. Now, that virtual machine, that operating system, operates exactly the same way that it always does. If I were to open up a screen to a virtual machine, Windows Server 2012, or a physical machine, Windows Server 2012, okay, you wouldn't see a difference. It's the same OS. It's doing the same thing. That virtual machine, however, the quote-unquote hardware it's consuming is only a fraction of the hardware that is on that physical server. Essentially, that physical hardware down at the bottom on that physical server, we call that shared hardware now. All of the VMs, all of those guest operating systems, we call them sometimes, they're all consuming the same resource. Now, there's some dynamics that we need to get into. It's like, well, what if they use too much? What if they use too little? We'll get into that in a moment. Okay? But this is how I'm changing that fundamental equation. Right in the middle of the little diagram there, you see the word vSphere right in the middle. So it's vSphere x64 architecture. That is that VMware operating system. That little blue layer on the server right there. That's so VMware vSphere. That's VMware's operating system. Essentially, remember that operating system has really one purpose and one purpose only. It is there to sit in between the virtual machines and the real physical hardware, to give each virtual machine its own little piece of the pie, if you want to call it that, slice and dice that hardware up. This is how much you see, this is how much you see, this is how much you see, and essentially sit there as a buffer and intermediary right in between those two and allow those machines to use that portion of the hardware that we gave them. That, in essence, is the magic of virtualization. We'll take questions at the end. If you're firing questions away, again, I'll give you as much explanation as I can with this. You also leave with my email address. If you want to email me some questions, you can do that too. One of the biggest questions that we ask, or we should be asking always, in all facets, is why? We kind of alluded earlier to some financial benefits buying fewer servers, I'm taking up less rack space, I'm consuming less power. Okay, those are some dollars and cents things, which I'd be happy if this are. But when we take a look at regular physical servers, old-fashioned physical servers, there's some issues with those, and there always have been. This is not late-breaking news here. Okay? The fact in a traditional physical architecture that I'm tying that operating system to the physical hardware, that has some downsides to it. Again, it always has. Downtime. Okay, I've got to do some maintenance on the hardware. I've got to add more RAM or do something like that. Okay, I need to take the server offline over the weekend. My OS is down. My applications are down. Okay. One of the cool things you can do with virtualization, if I can just backwards a couple of slides here, when I set up virtual servers, I can set up these 4 servers to essentially work in tandem with each other. And one of the really cool technologies that VMware pioneered is something called vMotion. And quite simply defined, vMotion is the ability to take a virtual machine that's running on one vSphere server, move it to another vSphere server while the virtual machine is running. We do not take it down. We do not disconnect any users. The machine continues to do what it does. Nobody notices. It doesn't miss a beat. I can take all those virtual machines off of that first server on the left-hand side. I could redistribute those VMs to my other 3 servers. No downtime. They didn't turn off when that happened. If I need to take the first server offline to do some physical maintenance on it this weekend, great. My users, my operating systems, my applications didn't experience any downtime. That's possible with virtualization. In the world, you cannot separate the operating system and the applications from the hardware. They're physically tied together. You take the server down, you take the OS down, you take the apps down. They're all down. In a full world, we're essentially kind of divorcing that virtual machine from the hardware. I can move the VM around without taking it down. By the way, if you've never seen that technology in action, the first time you see it in action, it really is amazing. And maybe I'm revealing how much of a big geek I am, and I think that's amazing. But it's just so cool to say, hey, that OS was running on that server now it's running on that server, and nobody knew this. Just magically happened. Okay? Sometimes migrating from an old hardware platform to a new hardware platform is incredibly painful. I've got a server that I've had around for 3, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. It's out of warranty. It's an old crusty server. I need to get rid of it. It's got some program running on it. Well, buying a new server, getting that application, getting that data and everything transferred over and running on the new server, sometimes that's a fairly difficult proposition. Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in scenarios where, yeah, it happens really easy and no big deal. Other times it's like, wow, that's incredibly painful, or sometimes even impossible. Again, I introduce virtualization, and that operating system, those applications are now no longer physically tied to the hardware they're running on. If one of my VMware vSphere servers gets old or I outgrow it and I need to introduce a new server, again, I can plop a new server in, install my vSphere operating system on it, move my VMs over, decommission the old server, no downtime with that. These problems that we see with physical servers, these challenges, and again, we've always seen these. Virtualization starts to say, there's a different way to do this. Now, a couple of other challenges with traditional physical architectures. If you look way down at the bottom of the slide, it says physical servers are typically very underutilized. If you were to go out and spec out what a particular application needs, so I'm going to run some application, the vendor of that application says, okay, great. Well, you need to have a server with this much CPU and this much memory and this much disk, etc. That's what the vendor says. And very often they'll say, well, if you're going to do this much, you need this level of hardware. You want to do a little bit more, you need more hardware. Okay, thank you, vendor. So I go out and buy a server. Now, everything's great. My application's running. But my IT people look at that server and say, wow, that server's not even breathing hard. Our vendor told us that the server had to have, you know, a quad-core processor and 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it had to have a, you know, 800 gigabyte disk. But when we actually look at the server and look at what that application really consumes, it only actually consumes a fraction of that. A lot of times vendors will give you that worst case scenario. Oh, you better buy a server that's this big just in case. Well, that's great if I'm a just in case use case scenario, but what we find is that if you look at just average servers out there in business, the physical hardware on those servers, usually we're only using about 25% of it on average. So what that means is when you have those shiny new physical servers out there, okay, for this physical server architecture, you spend a bunch of money, and all of a sudden your IT person says, oh yeah, these are great servers, those are awesome. They're not even breathing hard. You're only actually using 25% of the capacity of all of those. It's kind of a fact of life. Well, look at your virtualized infrastructure. With my virtualized infrastructure, I can look at my actual real hardware usage on my VMware vSphere server. And I can say, I've got some capacity still available. I have a physical CPU, disk, network, memory. I've still got some capacity there. I'm running at about 50% capacity. So you know what? Yeah, that server could handle running 2 or 3 or 4 more virtual machines. No problem. Again, we have a finite amount of hardware. I can't put infinite amounts of virtual machines on there, but I can start to size my machines and utilize my machines significantly more efficiently. I essentially don't have all that wasted hardware out there anymore. Now, we could go on and on and on with issues of a traditional physical architecture. You guys may have examples beyond that. But essentially, we can summarize it by saying, with this old way of doing things, this physical server architecture, you're kind of walking around with handcuffs on. Yeah, sure, you can do a few things, but it's cumbersome at best. I don't like doing that. Virtualization changes that scenario. Virtual machines are now independent of the hardware. As I mentioned, I can literally move virtual machines from one physical server to another, and the virtual machine doesn't ever have to turn off. Security. Somebody out there saying, whoa, whoa, wait, hold on, time out. You mean to tell me you're going to put 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 machines, they're all going to share the same CPU and the same memory? You're going to tell me that's secure? Yeah, actually, I am going to tell you that's secure. Because that VMware vSphere operating system, remember, it has one purpose and one purpose only, to allocate out hardware and keep virtual machines separate from each other. It's all about the virtual machine. Quite literally, those virtual machines that are sitting side by side on those VMware vSphere servers, not only do they not know they're a virtual machine, they're just an OS, but those virtual machines have absolutely no idea that they're sitting by side with other machines and are sharing the same CPUs. That is completely hidden from those machines. When I teach my vSphere classes, I have a good analogy for this. We say, one of the students will say, does the VM know it's a VM? Does it know it's running on a VMware vSphere server? The answer is no. And I'll say, have you ever seen the movie The Matrix? These virtual machines are trapped in the Matrix, and they don't know they're in the Matrix. They haven't taken the red pill yet. If you've seen the movie The Matrix, you get that. If you haven't, then you can forget my analogy out there. Virtualization solves some of these problems, and it doesn't expose us to any other security concerns than what we would normally have. I mean, you still run antivirus and all that kind of fun stuff. Right? The bottom of the slide here. Some of the most exciting things that we get to do with virtualized servers is in the area of whether we call it failover or high availability or survivability, things like that. There's just some amazing technology that we have. If I go back to my virtualized infrastructure here, you look at this diagram. You see 6 virtual machines running on that one server. One of the things that probably popped into your head was, oh wait, hold on, time out. You have 6 operating systems running on that one physical server. Okay, that's kind of cool. What happens when that server dies? What happens when somebody's walking behind the rack of servers and they kick a power cord? Because it's going to happen. Or what happens when we blow a CPU or a motherboard? Because it's going to happen. Well, we can handle that. There are technologies that VMware gives us with their operating system, capabilities that we have here. One of those technologies is something we call HA, or high availability. Put very simply, if that first server that has 6 virtual machines on it dies, just literally up and dies, the VMs obviously are going to go offline. If that server dies, the VMs die. But what the HA technology does is it allows us to automatically restart all the VMs. Started. Yes. Now, any person presented with a scenario, how much downtime? Well, of course, the correct answer to every question is it depends, but we're talking minutes here. There's a detection time to figure out, hey, is it really down? Double check. Then obviously we have to restart the OSs. It takes time. So you're looking 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes maybe of downtime. But the things can automatically get restarted when one of those physical servers dies. All right, sounded cool. Kind of like that. Now, you're a business owner, and you say, that's pretty cool. That's going to work. But you know what? I've got this one application. It's critical. That one application, that's my money maker. If that machine goes offline, I lose money. I lose money fast. Do you have a solution where we can have zero downtime? The answer is yes. And obviously there's some technology we've got to implement to do this, but we also have a technology called FT. FT stands for fault tolerance. Again, very simply put, that's twin VMs. Instead of having a virtual machine only on one VMware vSphere server, we'll take a twin of that and put it on another server and run them simultaneously. Anything that happens on the first virtual machine is real-time duplicated over to the second virtual machine. The obvious benefit is the first server dies, I got another one there. It's already running, ready to take over. All the changes are there, so I get a zero downtime solution. Now, there's always limitations with technology. We'd have to dig in and look at your scenario, okay? But we have scenarios, we have technologies that can cover downtime, restart, offline for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Downtime, oh, zero downtime, got to be running. Have some technology that can address that. So let's take it one step further. Let's say those 4 servers right there, that's your data center, okay? That's your physical location. You've learned your lesson by watching the news. What happens when your entire data center goes away? It can happen. Other than Nebraska, this is Tornado Alley. Okay, springtime rolls around, we start to duck. All right? We have technology. And again, these are just different pieces of technology we're going to implement. We have technology called Site Recovery Manager. It's just one of the components that VMware has, which literally what Site Recovery Manager gives me is the ability to do that failover, but to do it for an entire physical site. So my entire physical site just disappeared. I've got a disaster recovery site already built sitting out there, and I can automatically get those DR machines fired up at an alternate location. Again, you're getting several layers of technology deep, and there's a lot of plumbing that's going to make that work. But virtualization gives me the ability to do those kinds of things. If you were going to come to me and say, hey, I need to do all those, and it's a physical server architecture, sometimes we're going to run into a brick wall and say it's impossible. Other times we'll say, well, it's incredibly difficult. Other times, it's incredibly expensive. In a virtualized world, this stuff's built right in. Not to oversimplify things, but you give me 2 VMware vSphere servers, I'll have HA set up in 5 minutes. And it's not because I'm smart. It's just, it's not that hard to do. We've got lots of traditional physical servers gives us, and we have lots of potential solutions to those challenges that a virtual architecture gives us. Now, I started off by talking about saving money. Hey, you're going to buy fewer servers, you're going to have less power consumption, okay, less space in the data center, da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, that's all fine and good. We have to take in these other considerations. What's the cost of downtime? We have to calculate that in because I'm going to have to measure, hey, when I invest in this vSphere product, okay, sure, it may save me some money over here, but it costs me money over here. What are we saving in downtime and things like that? Those are parts of the equation out there. Just a couple more slides, and then we'll see if you guys have some questions for me. Some common pushback we get. Virtualization. Yeah, that's good for that big corporation down the street with 50 or 60,000 people, okay, but it's not good for me. Nope, not true. Even the smallest businesses can potentially benefit from virtualization. Now, I'm not going to kid you here. Economies of scale matter, okay? The bang for your buck that a company would receive virtualizing thousands of servers, okay, versus 1 or 2 servers, okay, it's differences in scale. But we literally can get out there and start virtualizing with one single virtualization server. Yeah, I don't get the high availability, the failover, all that kind of fun stuff, okay, but I can start off just by converting a couple physical machines over to a virtual architecture. VMware even has a scaled-down baby version of their ESXi operating system that's completely free. Okay? You don't get a lot of the fancy, cool features with it, okay? But it can get you started. And even consolidating a couple of physical machines can make a difference. The next big thing that we encounter as a objection is it's too hard. I mean, okay, Sean, you're an instructor, you know all this stuff, you're a big geek, you make it sound easy, okay? We don't have the expertise. Well, you may not have the expertise in-house. Lots of consulting firms out there you can hire piecemeal, do these things. It's not difficult technology to learn. This technology is absolutely no more difficult than any other technology to adopt, and I would argue in many cases VMware's done such a good job with technology. Some of this is just trivially easy. Now I'm saying for an IT person it's trivially easy. I'm trying to teach my wife how to do this. She's a special education teacher. She wouldn't be quite as easy, but that's okay. VMware not only has a fantastic product, but if I can brag about what we do at New Horizons, they've got fantastic training programs out there. Now, before we get to a quick Q&A here, and I know you're all probably on a limited time frame as I am over lunch and stuff like that, I just want to show it to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share out my screen here, and what I want to show you essentially is what this looks like. Now, what I've done is stop sharing my PowerPoint. Okay, so you're now seeing a desktop. I'm connected to a lab setup, and this is actually the lab setup I'm using in my class this week. If you were in my VMware class this week, this is what you would be doing. Now, I'm going to open up this program right here. Again, I'll just wait for your screens to refresh out there. Okay. This is one of the management tools that we have for VMware. It's called the vSphere client. And again, if you've never seen this before, looks crazy, whatever, but what we're seeing right here is we're seeing my virtual infrastructure. And each of these items right here where it says CLA, ES61, CMP, ES61, those are all virtual machines. All of those virtual machines are actually executing on one single physical server. If I just change over my screen here real quick, all of those virtual machines are running on top of that one single physical ESXi server. That's a physical server. It's actually in a data center in Tucson, Arizona. It was down in Tucson. Okay, that's where my server's at. Okay, this server is a dual CPU server, 2.533 gigahertz. Okay, it's got some RAM out there. It's got 16 gig of RAM. Okay, I'm using 14 out of that 16 gig of RAM. But here's the thing: I've got one physical box out there, one physical ESXi server, and I am running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 virtual machines on there. It looks like if I counted that correctly. Now, these are fully functioning operating systems. If I were to open up the screen of one of these operating systems, what I will see is I will see that this is going to be a Windows server. Let's wait for the screen refresh here. That machine right there is a Windows server. It's a Server 2008 R2 server. This could be any machine in your environment doing exactly what any machine in your environment does. Your administrators, your users, etc., are going to communicate with that machine exactly the same way that they normally would. It runs exactly the same applications. It's a virtual machine. It's sitting on top of the same physical server as all the rest of those virtual machines, sitting side by side. If I look one more step at this virtual machine, I can go out there and see that this virtual machine has a single CPU. It's got 4 gig of RAM allocated on it. Now, keep in mind, I'm running currently I have started I've got currently running 6 virtual machines on this one physical server, and they're all running. They're all doing whatever it is they're supposed to do. But if I take a look at my physical ESXi server out here, notice my 2.5 gigahertz processors, even running all 6 of those virtual machines at one time, I'm only using a fraction of the CPU horsepower of that machine. I'm using up almost all the RAM. If I were going to add some more virtual machines out here, I would probably want to say, I might need to add some more RAM to that machine to handle the load. Okay? But they're sharing all of that physical hardware out there. I don't have the one machine, one OS type scenario anymore. Shared hardware. Now, of course, there's infinite things I can do inside my vSphere environment. You can come take my class, we spend a week playing around with this, okay, and it's very, very cool stuff. So I'm going to go back to my slides here for a second and talk about what you can do next. And we're going to do Q&A here in just a moment. Okay? More information. Okay? Again, I'll have my email address up here in a moment. If you want to email me directly with a technical question, please do so. I'm glad to hear from you. Hit VMware.com. Lots of demos, lots of free webinars, things like that. Okay? Call your local VMware rep. Get them in. Okay? You jumped into virtualization a little bit. You want to jump in more? Okay? We're talking about virtual servers, but I can do virtual desktops as well. Virtual machines for my users. That's an interesting scenario. We can start looking at cloud technology. And basically with cloud technology, you're saying, hey, this all sounds great, but what if I don't want to buy the hardware myself? What if I want to let somebody else do that? Okay, it's part of what cloud technology is all about. We have options to do that. So there's lots of different directions that we can potentially go. There's my email address again. You didn't write that down before. Please write that down. I welcome questions about any of this or an off-the-wall question, whatever. And I will now turn it over to Q&A. If any questions have come in, I will be glad to take those.
So I don't have any questions in the box right now. Feel free to enter them in right now.
Okay.
Connie, it looks like you have your hand raised. I have a question from Connie that says, who is doing cloud-based solutions for VMware?
Good question. When we look at cloud solutions, there are 3 different ways we can approach cloud solutions. The first would be a private cloud, and that's basically where you're going to build it yourself. It is for you and by you. You're running the whole thing. Now, you may be renting data center space from somebody down the street, but you're managing the whole thing. Okay? Public cloud is the other end of the spectrum, and that is literally where you want to farm over all of this infrastructure to somebody else. You'll still manage the apps and the security and the users and all that, but you want to take all that physical infrastructure and say, you know what, I'm going to write you a check, go do that. VMware themselves has cloud hosting solutions, so you literally can contract with them. One of VMware's big competitors, and I don't want to tell you that they don't exist, but probably the largest cloud provider out there today is Amazon Web Services. VMware and Amazon are duking it out to see who's going to be the king of that hill. They're probably the biggest out there. And then literally what we're seeing is companies that are literally springing up every single day. Local companies that are doing cloud hosting, for a small and medium-sized business. Your larger companies, HP has a presence. They have cloud solutions. IBM has cloud solutions, etc. The third type of cloud, and this is the one that VMware thinks everybody's going to end up doing someday, is what we call hybrid. And that is, you will find places where it makes sense to farm something out to a third party and have them do it in the cloud, like maybe you go with Salesforce.com, but you have Salesforce.com hosted by Salesforce in the cloud, but you're going to do everything else in-house, your own email and things like that. Or maybe you use Microsoft's Office 365 or email, SharePoint, Link. Okay, I'm giving them that application in the cloud, but I'm still hosting all the rest of my stuff internally. That's what VMware calls a hybrid cloud, and they think, yeah, everybody's going to do that someday. So VMware, all the other major big companies, Amazon's, IBM's, HP's, they're the biggies. Look in your local environment as well. I know we've got a couple of smaller hosting environments even here in Omaha. So, lots of different solutions out there.
I have a question from Carlos that says, do you need any prerequisites before going into VMware?
From an IT perspective, if you're thinking, okay, IT administration, what does it take? Just a general IT knowledge. You know, if you walk into class and say, I've never used a computer before, okay, you're not the right solution. You're not the right person for that class. But if you can do basic system administration on Windows, you know, setting up files and folders and things like that, if you understand the basics of networking, okay, those are kind of some just really basic prerequisites. Of course, the more you know, the better. What I would advise would be, and again, self-serving promotion here, talk with your New Horizons rep, and depending upon what you're looking at implementing, for instance, if you're going to do server virtualization versus desktop virtualization, the prerequisites would be a little bit different. If you're familiar with these terms, there's a couple of kind of like entry-level IT classes and certifications. A+ is kind of a basic hardware OS type of a certification, and then, or class and certification, and then Network+, which is networking basics. If you have that type of equivalent knowledge, you'll be fine. And again, you can shoot me an email for more specifics on that, or again, your New Horizons rep can let you know that. But it's not a ton of prerequisites to get it, but some basic IT knowledge.
He said thank you, and I do have an A+ and Net+ certification. I have another. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're golden. You got A+ and Network+, you're fine.
Cool. I have another question from Connie that says, have you worked with Hyper-V before, which the Microsoft Hyper-V, and is it the same as VMware, or what are the pros and cons versus it?
Great question. The answer is yes. I'm a Microsoft trainer as well as VMware trainer, so I'll be vendor neutral here for just a second. What I explained about the basics of virtualization, the physical versus the virtual machines, I could have substituted Microsoft's Hyper-V for VMware vSphere. Okay, they are apples to apples type of products. Now, the VMware salesperson will pound their chest and say they're better. The Microsoft, okay, will pound their chest and say they're better. When you boil it down, the basic concept, they are doing the same thing. Now, where we see differences, and again, I'm trying to say as straight down the middle as I can here, no one will argue VMware has a more mature product. They've been around doing it longer. Okay, virtualization, VMware's been around doing it longer. Microsoft is a little bit newer to the game. Okay, that's just a factual statement. If you compare what Microsoft does with Hyper-V today with what VMware does today, their hypervisors, what actually runs the virtual machines, are virtually equivalent. That is my opinion. I've looked at them both. I've used them both. Compare the hypervisors side by side, very similar. Where you get the differences is in the higher end features. The ability to move running virtual machines around, the failover capabilities and things like that. Okay, that kind of extra add-on on top of stuff. That's where you see differences. And Microsoft has done a fantastic job. I love what they're doing with Hyper-V. I would still say, though, that VMware is a step ahead when you get to those higher end features. It's honestly just because they've had a longer lifespan of doing it. That's what it comes down to. But again, really respect Microsoft. Hyper-V is a great system. It is definitely worth looking at. I think VMware still has the edge as they get into the higher end features. So, good question. Thank you.
So I don't have any other questions popping up right now. So want to thank everyone again for coming out for the webinar today. We will be having